spaces and names, so it looks like we're missing the new supervisor. I think that's, and Ismat, the controller. She's got COVID, I think, is what yeah, so she's not here. Is the supervisor coming?
She indicated, she sent a text, she sent an email, I think.
Yeah.
Indicating that she wanted to try to make it, but if she didn't, we should go ahead and proceed. It looks
Okay.
like a town attorney is here at her request.
That's it, right? Okay. Okay. All right. Do you want to call the meeting to order then? Should we call the meeting to order then?
Yes, I see that Marina has also joined us by video. Hi,
Okay.
Marina.
Hi, everybody.
Okay. All right.
It would be very helpful to me if we could do a roll call.
Sure. Okay. Supervisor Puccioni. Okay. Councilperson Brennan. Here. Okay. Comptroller Ismat Alam. Okay. Chief of Police Jordan Cochan.
Present.
Town Attorney Paul Briggs. PBA Officer Jeffrey Relation.
Here.
Manuel Amato.
Here.
Dale Black Pennington.
Present.
Marina Prop Franchild.
Present?
Allison Marinucci here. Paul Zonderman.
And I would just note for the record that I'm Elena Finn and I'm appearing on behalf of the legal department for the town.
So we are
So Ms.
missing,
Freeman-
we have
Ms. Freeman, are you
9.
appearing?
What's that?
Are you appearing in the shoes of Paul,
Briggs.
Yes,
Briggs?
yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
Let me, I will call the meeting. There we go. Have we decided, is it your understanding that we're going to be meeting at this time and day all the time because the new supervisor and one other person, that's really the only day they can do it? I mean, that's why we switched.
Yeah, that was my impression. Does this work for everybody? Just for my own sanity, I'd like to keep it a consistent date going forward.
Yeah.
This date is fine. This date and time is fine.
Okay, all right. So we'll make a motion to meet, we'll just meet every Monday, first Monday of, not Monday, oh my gosh. The first Thursday of the month at 5:30.
And second,
Did you want 5:30 or 5:15? Because either one is fine. I know an email went out with 5:15 on it.
We'll just do 5:30.
Okay.
Keep it nice and simple.
okay, the motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye, thank you.
Anybody opposed? Okay, we have a meeting time. It really bounced around a lot in the beginning, but I guess it was settled when, the supervisor, when they can be here and not. Now, Marina, are you, have a committee that looked into some things and you want to raise something here on the agenda? Or are we waiting? What's the status of that?
You're talking about the document that was the 38-page document that was submitted? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Well, there's 11 people on the task force, right? And we have 4 officers. Well, let me think. We don't have a treasurer, but we have 3 officers. And I think that, and then there's the town attorney, so that's 4 people. And then there's the supervisor, so that's 5. And that leaves 6 people. And I think that Dale, I think you could do a better job with this than I could. It's not really totally still clear in my mind.
Okay, there are two things. Before we get to the approval and discussion of the police reform implementation task force plan, which is the 35-page document, the agenda calls for the approval of minutes from the last meeting.
Right.
So I'm just asking that we proceed in the process of the agenda. And so could we please discuss the minutes, and then we can move on then to the police reform implementation task force plan document and discuss thereafter the formation of subgroups once we've ratified and approved the document. Can I make that motion, and can we proceed in that order?
Would you state the motion in one sentence, sort of?
First motion is to follow the agenda, and I move for the approval of the minutes from December 15th, 2021.
Just a minute. This is the agenda.
What's that?
Here's the agenda.
Was that on? Yeah.
Yeah, it came out, so that's the first thing.
Yeah, I guess that's on the agenda, and you want to, did you get down what she said?
What I'm going to do, Judge, is I'm going to go back and watch the recording. That's what I did for the last
Oh.
meeting. It was just much more helpful than me to try to take notes while everyone's talking.
And actually, it's December 21st.
Okay.
Okay, that motion, I assume, has a second here somewhere.
Second.
And any discussion on the motion? Pro or con?
I would just note that the minutes should be corrected to state December 21st, 2021.
Are we talking about what is the it that we're talking about? The 38-page document?
We're
I thought you guys
we're
met on the 15th.
discussing the meeting minutes.
Oh, sorry, then my date is wrong. I apologize.
Okay, so the meeting was on the 21st of December? That was a
No,
Tuesday.
Forget what I said. I was-
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so let's just go back. The meeting minutes state December 15th, 2021. Motion has been made to approve them. I second that motion.
Okay. All those in favor of the minutes being approved?
I
Aye.
Okay. Okay, now we can talk about the implementation. So it looks like when I watched the meeting, because I wasn't here last, it looks like everyone was sort of tasked to look at the document that Dale and Marina created, and we would decide at this meeting if that's how we wanted to move forward in terms of how we break up and track the work. So did everyone, I did send it out, the updated one, a couple days ago with everybody on this group, just so everybody had it and could take a look, and then we could come here and determine if that's how we want to move forward, breaking down the recommendations, and then as Dale and Marina said the last meeting, creating some sub-working groups and figuring out what everyone's preference was, it looked like.
And may I just jump in? The document, which comprises 38 pages, breaks down our work, starting with the what we were charged to do as a task force. And it lists our charge, where recommendations from the New Unit Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative Report and recommendations from the Center for Naval Analysis Racial Audit Report, that's the CNA report, are to be considered and implemented. And we are to make recommendations on how they should be implemented, looking and examining the budgetary impact and providing an implementation task for timeframe. And so that is our charge. Recommendations should be divided into categories concerning, again, the impact to the budget and also concerning a time frame. We are also charged with providing status updates to the Police and Public Safety Committee, for which we are a subgroup, and we are to do that monthly. Additionally, we shall engage in quarterly community conversations. We've already missed that opportunity with our first quarter, but I'm sure we'll continue for the rest of the time we're in panel and try to meet with interested community members, especially engaging minority stakeholders to promote ongoing dialogue and ensure transparency in this process. And last but not least, we are charged with trying to implement these goals by October of 2022. So that's what the first part of this document makes out. It spells out what was stated in our implementing resolution by the board. And then the rest of the document divides all of the recommendations, incorporating both the CNA recommendations and the collaborative's recommendations into 4 categories. And we were guided by the categories developed by the collaborative. Fortunately, the CNA recommendations fell neatly into those categories also. So we can break up into subgroups to analyze this according to those 4 categories. We've also discussed having an oversight committee, which is constituted of, with the police chief, Mr. Relation, I apologize, I forgot your title, the town comptroller, so that we have a good financial analysis, and also legal, our lawyer or town lawyer. So we have legal advice, the police advice, and financial advice, along with 2 citizen members who would like to join that oversight subcommittee or subgroup. So those are just some discussions that we have had regarding myself, Marina, Allison, about how to structure our analysis and proceed from here. So that's my overview of this document. Can we have discussion and then decide if we'll use it as our guiding document at this point?
Anybody have any concerns?
I make the motion that this document, the latest rev was 12/21 of 2021, that it be approved.
Just one second. Chief Cogan couldn't have some mic difficulty.
Yeah, I just said it for clarification. When I was not a part of the discussion about an oversight subgroup. Is that going to be separate, obviously? So are we saying we're going to separate myself, Sergeant Relation, Town Attorney, Comptroller's Office, to have us as a separate group to be kind of overseeing the subgroups in conjunction and working with them? Is that my understanding of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to jump in just for a minute. Before we talk about that, I think we first need to approve the document that the latest rev is 12/21. And then I think we can talk about how we want to proceed in utilizing this document.
No, that's, Marin, I don't disagree with you. That's fine. I was just trying to clarify from my understanding because I wanted to make sure that this motion wasn't setting the standard for how we were going to then subcategorize the subgroups to then
Right.
address the document. That's all I wanted to make sure about.
I totally agree.
Okay.
we need to have a discussion. We
Okay,
just have
perfect.
some ideas. Nothing is finalized in anybody's mind at this point. We just have some ideas that warrant discussion from the entire task force.
Excellent. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
And I apologize, Chief Cochan. I didn't mean to confuse you. I just threw that out there because that was discussion going on after we adopted the document.
Okay. All right.
I make a motion that we approve the 38-page recommendation revision 12/21/2021 with the full knowledge that it will be updated as things are added to it in terms of status updates.
Second that motion.
Okay.
Can you state the motion again clearly?
I don't have the exact title in front of me. If you hold on, I will get it and read exactly what it is. 1 second.
Do you have enough to
Here it is.
know
Yes,
what
it
the
is. Here it
motion
is.
is?
They're recording it, so I'm gonna
Yes.
rewatch the recording and I'll do the
All right.
minutes.
I make a motion that the PRITF implementation plan categories revision December 21st, 2021 be approved.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? The one thing I heard, is this about a small, a review committee? What did you call it?
We're not talking about that right now, Judge Zonderman. We're talking about just the document
get to that.
itself.
Oh,
Then we
all
will
right.
have a discussion.
Oh, all right. That was getting kind of specific there for a minute, but
Mhm.
go ahead.
I'm getting confused. I realize I wasn't at the last meeting. I apologize. But is the date of this revision 12/7 or?
There's another one. There's a 12/21. It's just slightly different, but I'll make sure you get because we haven't done anything with it yet, but it's going to be updated if we approve it once we start the work and status update. So 12/21 is the latest iteration, but it shouldn't be terribly different.
No, it's not different. Manuel, the only thing that's different about it is that originally it was supposed to be 5 town members and it was 5 town members and 3 citizens. Then it was 5 town members and 5 citizens. And then it was further changed. This is all in terms of Town of Niskayuna resolutions to 5 citizens and 6 people. The PBA representative was added. So I just revved it to include the proper personnel for this task force. That's the only change.
Good to go?
Okay.
Well,
All right. So do you want
Go
to
ahead.
see if we and do the motion so we can get this going?
Yeah, any further discussion? Anybody have any questions? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is carried, and you'll get the text of it and before the next meeting.
Yep, I'll send the minutes out. Okay, so it looks like now we can discuss kind of how we're going to use the document. So to Dale's point about the the oversight committee, it looks like in the last meeting when I did the minutes is that if you have the document in front of you now, you can take a look at the different groups. I think there's 4.
Yes.
And just kind of give an idea of a preference of what group you'd like to work on. And then we can kind of discuss what that work would look like and go from there. Dale and Marina really put this together, so I'm going to kind of defer to them.
I'm reading from it right now. The functions are, the 4 groups are determining the functions that the Niskayuna police perform. The next one is employing smart and effective policing standards and strategies. The third one is fostering community-oriented leadership, culture, and accountability. And the fourth is recruiting and supporting excellent personnel.
Are there specific numbered,
On the first page. So this is what she was referring to. Should be right here. These are the subcommittee
oh,
groups. Yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
So, all right, that's right from the first page of the recommendations.
Yeah, it's under 2, and then it's A, B, C, and D. Those are the 4 groups that Marina is referring to.
Any discussion? Do you want to, were you looking at a motion or?
I mean, I think we should determine who wants to do what and what is expected of the subgroups, because it sounded like at the last meeting that these subgroups, and we looked at open meeting laws, and I don't think that they need to be public. Please check me if I'm wrong. But that work would happen in between these monthly meetings, and what these monthly meetings would serve is really just report out of where we were, tackling the recommendations and, kind of discussing any constraints, which I'm sure we're going to run into, budgetary, legal, what have you. So, I think we would probably need to establish expectations of the subgroups and what people should be prepared to do. Because some of these, I think everyone should look at it carefully. I think it's a good idea to have an oversee where we have the police force and legal and the comptroller, because they're really going to be able to check us on some of the things that can and cannot reasonably be accomplished in that timeline, because we're talking October. There was a couple things that I saw, like what the chief said last week, like just not being familiar with the scope and structure of how the police force works and union bargaining and all that. So should we start by kind of doing a feel of who wants to do what, if anyone has a preference? First, I guess the people that were mentioned on the oversee committee or oversight, whatever it's called. Do you have any, I'm looking at 3 of you because you were named. Do you have any issues with that?
My question, and I apologize because I'm just coming into this now, but my question is, how do you all see the oversight committee meshing with these 4? Do you see us involved also in one of these 4, or would the oversight just be the oversight with everybody else involved in these 4?
I think absolutely. Like I'm looking at, for instance, like A and D, recruiting and supporting excellent personnel. Like I really feel like Jordan or Jeff should be on one of those 2, just because you're familiar with that's your wheelhouse. Those are that's where you work. So you would certainly have some knowledge, but that's just my thought. My thought would be, and I'm going to have Dale and Marina jump in, but my thought would be these subgroups would meet, we would decide how we're going to work together, look at the recommendations, and then when we come together at this meeting, we report out, and then, that committee can kind of say, we're going to look into this, what you're saying, because our concerns are 1, 2, 3, and then you'll look into that and follow up. Does that make any sense?
And can I just jump in also?
Please.
I think since we're hammering this out and sort of spitballing, I also thought that committee could serve as a resource. So it's almost as though when other committees say we break into a committee in our subcommittees, I have an interest in being on A, C, or D, any of those. Or maybe all of those, depending on, how it's composed. And so say I meet with group A on Monday, and we've hammered out 10 recommendations and decided that we need some more information on 3 of them. And that information would have to do with budgetary questions. So we would call the controller and reach out to the controller, and in the capacity as oversight, the town controller, ISMAC, could give us some guidance. And also the subcommittee would maybe reach out to you, Chief Kochan, when we need questions as to how's this going to be implemented and what's a reasonable timeline using your expertise, and likewise for legal. And then, since you're aware of the issues we're already discussing, by the time we get to the next meeting, when we want to discuss those implementations and tell you what our milestones are, you can give us constructive feedback and we can probably finalize it at that point. Finalize the recommendation or implementation plan.
Let me
That's
just make a
my
suggestion, and you can take it, sort of take it or leave it. When I hear oversight committee, the title gives the impression that there's this small committee, and then there's a small committee to watch over this committee to make sure we do what we're supposed to do. The concept of oversight, I don't think that's the right title. However, I do like the idea of people meeting and working on the outside and talking to each other, which doesn't require us to be recorded and make it an official meeting. If that is giving us some flexibility to have some people get together when they want to and do some work, I like that idea, but I'd be thinking of that as a working committee versus an oversight committee. The oversight kind of suggests that there's an appeal process or something. And I don't know if that makes sense to anyone.
Judge
Makes sense.
Dunkerman, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Forget that terminology. I don't think anybody is determined to use that terminology, but this is the concept. This is the idea. I reached out to ISMAT, and then she reached back to me and told me that she had COVID. But if she had been available, what I had been planning to do was to meet with her. So that is just like one person meeting with her, not bombarding her with like 20 people. Well, there's not 20 people, but a whole lot of people bombarding her because she's very busy. And going through all of the 140 recommendations that we have roughly, and finding out which ones have budgetary impacts, which of those, which ones money was already allocated for 2022 when the budget was approved last year, and then discussing what needs, how long it would take to come, how much money would be needed for the remainder, and what would be the plan for that. Would it be a 5-year plan? Would it be a year plan? This is the kind of information that needs to be brought back to the 4 groups, A, B, C, and D, because if somebody is prioritizing that we should do, let's say they have recommendations 1 through 25, okay? And they prioritize them in a certain order, but the order doesn't coincide with the budgetary constraints, then they need to be aware of that. So I thought that it would make sense for 1 or 2 people to volunteer to meet with ISMAT and get that kind of information. Similarly, there are the same kind of concerns in terms of contractual constraints, and the only people that really can provide the task force with that information is Jordan and the police, the PBA representative. Those are the only people that have that information. Then, in terms of time frame, that kind of covers both, because like we talked about last time, let's say that it was a priority for body-worn cameras, but it was hard to get parts because of the supply issues that America is facing right now because of COVID. So people have to really think like project managers and find all this out. So it would be this, just for lack of better terminology, I'm calling it oversight because I can't think of another word, just as a working title for right now. It would be people that would volunteer to work with the police, with legal, and with ISMAT to get the constraints that will govern many of the recommendations, and then bring it back to the 4 groups so they have that information.
We could also call it a resource committee. um,
Oh, that's good.
or something along those lines, resource or expertise committee.
I like resource. I think that's what we would be doing. Judge Zonderman, was it clear? Did I succeed in explaining what the goal would be?
And would you repeat that a little louder?
Judge Zonderman, was I successful in explaining to you what the intent was?
Yes, I believe so, yes. I just, as I said, I didn't think it was an oversight committee. Resources is better, or resource subcommittee. So if you want to make a motion with with that name or one of those names, we could,
Before we do so, could we, Chief Cochin, I'd just like to get your feedback on how you, and also, I'm sorry.
Are you talking about Jeff, the PBA officer, representative?
And also Mr. Relations, I'm sorry, Jeff. Do you have any feedback that you want to give us? I don't want to encumber or think that, have you think that we're encumbering you in giving you extra work. I just think it's a way to design the work so that we can get it done functionally and put a hit, have our feet hit the ground right away at this point.
I think that's all a good idea, and I seem to think back a couple of meetings ago, that was brought up, and basically people seem to be in agreement that there should be outside groups, and they should be working on the specific subjects that they're in that group, and then come back and report it to us. I mean, that was a good idea, and I think that's what you're talking about. Are you saying you officially want to establish that now as whatever name you want, other than oversight committee? Working committees, I like the idea of being able to get together and people work on what they're interested in and then come in and report to us without having to be videoed. And, you can have a breakfast meeting at somebody's house and do it. It makes it much more flexible. So, I mean, the idea is good. So whatever you want to call, this is one committee or four groups, or what is that?
It would be a total of 5 groups, the 4 A, B, C, and D, and then a resource committee. The resource committee would find out the budgetary constraints, the time frame constraints, the contractual constraints, and the legal constraints on all of the recommendations that are encompassed by the groups A, B, C, and D. And we would get that information back to each one of the groups.
So it's these 4 groups and then another group saying, hey, here are the constraints you're working under, like legal barriers, budget, and so on.
Okay.
But I think she was trying to ask Chief Cochin what he thought about having the officers involved in this resource committee.
I'm okay with whatever structure everyone decides on. I think what I'm struggling with right now is if we're tasked with my understanding of dividing the recommendations into impactful to the budget or non-impactful, and then how we're going to rank them based upon a timeline of implementation. And I don't know what we're calling it at this point, but the resource committee is now finding out that information. What is everyone else tasked with doing when they get that information? Are they then going to do some sort of research as far as what the best practice to implement that is? Because my understanding is the task force is simply to do those things. So I'm struggling at this point to understand the totality of where we move on from there once we find that information from that process.
That's a good question.
Actually, the resource committee is just that. It's resources that's going to help the other 4 groups to carry out the process of determining if it's impactful to the budget or not impactful to the budget, and whether or not, how soon, what is a time frame for implementation
So like,
after they've made the, that two-prong analysis. So they're not gonna have you, the resource, make that determination. You're just gonna give them information and they'll make the determination. They
so
may even circle back to you to get confirmation. Say, for example, what have we been talking of? What have I heard before discussed here? The implementation of body cams. So you may say, well, this has been done, that has been done. You've already said that there've been 2 grants applied for, and I think there's actually been a total of 3 grants applied for. And so we need to know the timeline for those grants and what was included in the last budget. So that's information that we would get from the comptroller and also discuss with you. And then that subgroup and that would be probably subgroup employing smart and effective policing standards and strategies. Subgroup B would probably then go back and discuss it and come up with their plan
so
for implementation.
could we, this is how I'm thinking of it. Could we have one of each of those people spread out over the 4 committees, and that they're sort of, we're using them as a resource as we're going through these. We can reach out to them and then we report out on this meeting. They can be here, or if they're not able to be here, we email them about the possible constraints as they come up.
I don't know.
I'm just
That way,
confused.
I think all
we
these
could do it
resources
that
are at
way
our
also.
disposal.
Nothing is set in
right?
stone at this point.
Yeah.
We're
I'm
just
just confused
deciding how
why
we're
we
going
would
to
have to-
utilize
This is,
our resources.
So I
Allison-
think these resources are all at our disposal. If I'm thinking what like Paul and Allison were saying, we
Yeah.
don't need a separate committee because everyone is on the subcommittee and they've all dedicated to be resources for us. So if I have a question about, if Allison and I are working on something and we have a budget question, we're going to call ISMAT, or if we have a question legally, we're going to call Lena, or we're going to call as needed in our own subgroups, but we don't need to separate people out because we're all just here together as resources. Ongoing
The other
resources.
part of that, Jessica, is it may reduce redundancy. Because if we have 4 subgroups and you got 3 people from the 4 subgroups asking the same questions, maybe it would make sense just to have the resource committee, present and disseminate that, at one time. Or
Yeah, we could even utilize our meeting time and say, what are all our fiscal questions?
it's not going to work that way.
No.
I've been on I was a project manager at GE. It's not going to work that way, with all due respect. It really will not. It takes a lot of time. It's very nitty gritty. You got to get into the weeds, and you can have something that works on a budgetary sense, but it doesn't work in terms of legal. And then perhaps it works in terms of the police, the contracts with the police, but it doesn't work budgetary. You really need people to be on the teams, but you need a designated group of a couple of people who can find out these things. Then they go back to the groups and they let the groups know. And the way that I see it working is, let's talk about body cameras. And let's say that I'm on the group and body cameras is one of those items, one of those recommendations that we're looking at. What the benefit of having the resource committee is, let's say we find out that it can be implemented in December, that the body cameras will actually be coming in December of 2022. So the group that's working with body cameras needs to know that. And so since our due date is October of 2022, that group needs to record that all of the gates that we need to get through will be met, but we can't meet the October 22 date, but it will be there in December. And that, all of this takes a lot of work and prioritizing. There'll be other things that's going to require research, where people actually get on the internet and they explore. There'll be a recommendation. Nobody's going to know how to do it. So before you can implement something, you have to know what it is that you're talking about. That requires research. So I'm trying I think that having a resource committee does two good things. Number one, it frees up the committees to do the research because everybody is not an expert on this. The
So couldn't
second
just
thing
go
that
through
it
the
does
document
is
and
it
identify that
doesn't
stuff?
overtax
Couldn't you guys
legal,
just go
the
through the
police,
document and
or the
identify
controller's
these
office.
constraints already? It looks like the supervisor has her hand raised, but my question was, could this resource committee go through the document as it stands now and be able to identify these challenges? I mean, I know the chief has spoken about some of them already, so.
That's exactly what I said. Before before I found out that she got ill, I was trying to set up an appointment with her to actually go through,
Okay,
set aside the time and go through the entire document. And then I was going to type it up in the document that we have, the Rev of December 21st, and add what my findings to the document, put a different date on it, and distribute it to everybody. And then people would have all that information to work with when they meet in subcommittee.
okay.
There's a message there that Jamie has a hand raised. Is that right?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as I'm listening to this conversation, something that comes to mind is what if we created some sort of rubric that would help us determine to help us determine a rank order of recommendations in addition to their feasibility in terms of financial and resource and union. So I'm just envisioning like something we use in education quite often, just a rubric with different criteria and like a scoring value. So we can prioritize how important do we think this recommendation is? What's a value we could assign it for its financial feasibility? What's a value we could assign for its feasibility in terms of union constraints, personnel constraints, and so on and so forth? Because when I hear the word, when I hear the number, 144 recommendations, that's a significant amount of recommendations that in essence, we are trying to order, we're trying to rank order how, which ones are the most pressing, most important, and most feasible to adopt in the short run and then in the long run.
Jamie, I think we're saying the same thing. In order to determine the ranking falls out of feasibility as far as I'm concerned. For example, if
Yes,
I
agree with what you're saying.
Okay,
I'm just
yeah.
saying, if we create a rubric with very specific criteria to give some sort of numerical value, so that I'm trying to recommend that we somehow find a way to have an objective, like create some more objectivity into the evaluation process. That's all. Nothing to change the work groups or what's being considered as the resource group.
Jamie, do you mind if I comment on that?
Sorry, my dear, absolutely.
Thank you, Jamie, and I hope I get to meet you in person sometime. The way that I see it from being involved with project management is you kind of can't rank something until you can wrap, this is just my personal opinion, until you can wrap your arms around the constraints. For example, if you're trying to buy a piece of equipment, it has to do the job, but it can't be made out of titanium because then you can't afford it. So there's a break-even point. It's like figuring out how much are you willing to spend to get something that's good enough to really do your job adequately without breaking the bank, and can it be done in a timely fashion? And in my opinion, in my world, you can't prioritize, you can't rank without having that information. But once that information is known, then I completely agree with you. Then it's really important to rank things so that the goal is by October to have every single recommendation have a status. The status would be done, couldn't be done by 10/22, but it's in progress, and it will be done by such and such, or can't be done because of legal constraints, but this is an alternative, this can be done. In order to rank that, which is what our task is, we have to have the constraints made public knowledge.
My suggestion is just to move to, it's in addition to that. It's not saying we shouldn't rank, we shouldn't identify constraints. I'm simply saying, in addition to what's been recommended, it may be helpful if we create some sort of rubric with criterion in order to have some sort of numerical value to then rank order recommendations. That's all.
So could I make a recommend?
Actually, I think Jamie, and good to hear your voice. I think it's a valid suggestion. However, I think it's something that would have to be done within the subgroup. So once we break up into different committees, the committee, once they hit the ground running, they can then prioritize and maybe develop a rubric. If the recommendations lend themselves to such.
Go ahead.
Going back to what Supervisor Puccioni said, I couldn't agree more. We need to set a value system to what we're doing. We need to prioritize and then execute upon that. Otherwise, we'll just be talking in circles. So I mean, we need to figure out what the priority is and go at it that way and go from there.
So wouldn't it be feasible that the first step then we can decide what groups we want to work in, but the first step then to kind of really tie together what everyone's been saying, if I'm getting it correctly, is to have these folks that we identify as resources to go through the document and identify these constraints first? Because there are some things in here I know that you've said that would be very, very challenging to implement.
So I can't speak from a financial perspective, but simplest way forward is always the simplest way forward. I think we send this document to the comptroller's office and say, please itemize out these 140, whatever they are, suggestions and recommendations as far as impactful or not, with notes on why they are, so that we can have that real time.
That's great.
Then from there, I think we then break into those subgroups to have the discussions with legal, with the chief, with the PBA, to then discuss it. Because I think we can move the financial aspect right out of the way, right off the rip. I think we could check that off right away. That's something it should be very clear and concise. Do we have money? Have we put money aside? Do we anticipate getting money? It should be that simple, for me anyways.
No, I
And I
agree.
mean, correct me if I'm wrong, not all of
I
this stuff costs money,
I agree.
right? We can get a lot of this stuff
I
done
agree.
without cost.
I agree.
Can I just ask a question? Are we saying that the people on this resource committee are not going to be members of the other subcommittees?
No,
No.
that's not what they're saying. I
Oh,
think.
no, I'm asking. I
Yeah,
wasn't sure.
yeah, no, it's a good question. From what I'm understanding is that really what they're supposed to do is identify these barriers, right? Or just some realities of the structure that, we're working within. So I think what the chief was saying is we'll start with the controller, look at the budgetary constraints and have her make notes. So we have it for the next meeting. And then we can go from there. Do we want to wait to see what she said? Do you think the budget constraints are going to affect the outcome of who's going to work on what subgroup? Because we could still start doing the research on a lot of things.
Right, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So do we want to at least kind of start that?
Yes.
So we can start to do that work? Like, Dale, do you have a question?
Yeah, well, actually a statement. We have to be mindful that when we are in subgroups, the subgroups should be comprised of less than a quorum. That would be less than 6 members, so that we wouldn't, under open meeting laws, we would not be required to have a public meeting.
That makes sense.
Just a cautionary.
It makes sense. No, it makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Okay. So do we just want to go through like A, B, C, and D and see if anyone who wants to do what?
Yes,
Okay.
Well, all right. On number A is determining the functions that the Niskayuna Police perform. Now, what did you want to do on that?
Who wants to work on that committee? Okay. I'm going to do that. All right. So Judge Zondervan, Group A. Okay. So we have one person for anyone else? We're going to need more than one.
I'll join that.
Dale.
Dale.
Okay. Okay. And I think we're going to have to be on more than one
More than one
committee
committee.
because there's
Yes.
only 11 of us and we're talking about 4
I'll go on
groups.
this committee also.
All right. So we
I'll
got
do two.
Manuel. Okay.
All right, B,
Is 3 enough? Is that fine?
I mean,
You-
I think basically what we're doing, right, is we're forming these subgroups
Yeah.
only to gather information and
Correct.
put stuff together.
Yeah,
and then
it's a
we're gonna bring it back
research.
to the group.
Right.
Nobody's making any independent decisions. This is
No,
what's gonna
not at
happen.
all.
So-
No, no,
So
no.
we're gonna, I mean, basically working on policy, procedure, and cost.
Yeah, you're doing the
That's what
meat
it
and
comes down to.
potatoes, like figuring things out and say, hey,
Yeah.
this is what we came up with. What
I
do you think?
Whatever a subgroup brings it back, people might have different things to put into it, and that's what this is all about.
Yep.
Gathering information and putting it together,
Okay.
coming to a solution.
so do you want to go on with B, C? and D?
Anyone else want to do? Yeah. Anyone else want to be on Group A?
For the record, it doesn't matter to me, so wherever I'm needed, I can join a group.
All right. I'm going to put you on this Group A. I'm like hitting this microphone. Sorry. Okay. Do you mind if I put you on Group A?
That's fine.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
And just for the record, I'll let you guys put me on whatever group you want.
All right. You're going to go on all 4. Is that cool?
There you go.
Matter of fact,
Gotcha.
you're chairman.
Actually, I think you should, there's 4 of us, so we'd have to be 5. I'm going to put you on A too,
Okay.
just because I think having a police officer on that one would be important. I mean, they're important for all of them, but,
you
okay.
putting Jordan on A?
I'm putting Jeff on A.
Okay, because.
Jordan didn't volunteer himself yet, so
No, I couldn't tell who you were talking about,
I'm
sorry.
just teasing you.
I will go on any group that you folks want me on.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to put Jordan on Group B. Anyone else?
Shall we continue on?
What
with-
are you talking about, B now?
Yeah, we're on B.
I'll like to sit on B.
Okay.
Okay, Manny, that's employing smart and effective policing standards and strategies.
That's more in my background than anything else. really.
Who- I can't tell who's talking. Could people please say their names?
Yep, Jordan and Manuel is going to be on Group B, and I'll be on Group B as well.
All right, number C, fostering community-oriented leadership, culture, and accountability.
Marina, I'll be on Group C.
All right, Maria.
Marina,
Marina, I got it.
Marina,
I got it.
pardon me.
that's all right.
D,
Wait, we only have one person on C.
I'll do C as well.
Okay,
what's her name?
I'll
Elena.
do C as well.
all right, so maybe one more person on C would be good.
I'll go on C.
All right, thanks.
Who is that? Who's the 4th person? please?
Jeff,
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
I'm not seeing everybody when they talk. That's why I need people to say their names.
no worries.
And D is recruiting and supporting excellent personnel. That, I think, has a depth to it about hiring practices.
Sorry. It's okay if I put you on that one? Okay. Okay,
If you need somebody, I'll be on D too, because that's what I used to do when I worked for the state.
okay, definitely. All right, so we have Manuel, Jessica, and Jordan on that one. Okay, anyone else? We have 5 on Group A. We have 3 of us on B, 4 of us, 4 in C, and then 3 in D. Yeah. Dale, Manuel, Elena, and Jeff. I can take Elena out if you want. I mean, because you're going to be pulled in anyway for whatever. I just wanted someone that works within the town to be on at least one of each. I think that would be
And
important.
honestly, if it's more convenient, I could be on all of them.
Okay.
If that's what you guys want.
Okay. All right. Okay, so it looks like we have our groups set up. And I think, Marina, since you were working with Ismat, do you want to follow up with her? I know she's ill right now, and hopefully she's better soon.
Yes, I'll definitely follow up with her. And so I'd like to volunteer for something if people think this makes sense. I would like to volunteer to be the person that, okay, I don't know how to word this. The implementation plan categories, the 38 pager, it has columns where we are tracking progress. So if people in each of the groups could forward the progress to me before, like a week before the meeting, I will capture that in a revved document so that then everybody knows what everybody else is doing. So I'm volunteering to do that if people want me to do that.
Okay.
Let me ask the chief a question, now being a member of number 1 here, the police function. I would think that the certification might have something to do with that you're working on. I mean, you're working toward us being certified, I suppose. At least I seem to get that impression.
I don't think I understand what you're asking, Judge. Certified for what?
There's a certification for police
Are
department.
you talking about accreditation?
Accreditation?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yes. Oh, yes.
Accreditation.
That is something, obviously, we're going to work as kind of a mid to long-term range.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was thinking that the police function, you would probably need to explain to that group that you are working on that, and that is the goal of what you're working on. That'll cover a lot of areas.
Certainly. Yes. To answer your question, yes, that explanation would probably cover quite a few things.
And yeah, the things you've accomplished, okay, and the other things you're working on, we may be able to help with what you're working on.
No, I don't disagree. I think that's
Okay.
great insight into that you guys can assist with that.
Let's see. Well, it's an hour.
Hey, Judge, I just want to touch back on what Marina asked. I know we skipped over. Marina, I have no issues whatsoever with you being that kind of point person on the document to kind of facilitate that. I think that's excellent that you stepped in. I appreciate you volunteering because we all have to be mindful of people's time, and you seem to be very good at those things and very quick and expeditious about them. So I would love it if Marina was able to kind of facilitate that process for the group.
Yeah, I agree.
Whoops. You want to make motion on that, or we just want to agree amongst ourselves? How do you want to handle that thought?
I'm just conferring with Deputy Town Attorney Finn, and she said we don't need a motion. We can just agree on that.
Okay, great.
For that.
And Jordan and Jeff, last time that we met, you both talked about the need for transparency, and this way there will be transparency.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just one more thing before you close out, Judge. I know the comptroller's office has a lot going on, and we keep mentioning Ismat. Marina, if you want to get a jump start and you feel like calling me, and I can start talking to some of the budgetary constraints as well to kind of
Yes.
supplement that, you and I can talk offline anytime you need me to.
Jordan, that would be very helpful
Okay.
because, Ismat has no control over how fast
Yep.
she gets better.
No.
I certainly hope it's speedy, but in the meantime, we still need this information. So yes, I will contact you tomorrow.
Okay, excellent,
And set the time to meet.
excellent.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody?
Can I-
Go
Are
ahead.
we going to approve the bylaw?
Oh, yeah, we had the
Are
bylaws
we going to
too.
approve the bylaw?
Gail has her hand raised.
Okay, we have two additional issues on the agenda. The first is the approval and discussion of the bylaws. And I noticed that since we're running out of time and everyone has received the draft bylaws, we're still waiting for response from the lawyer's office, AKA through Paul Briggs. I would request that we table that article of the agenda for our next meeting. And we've already discussed the dates going forward.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I agree.
Sounds good.
I guess that'll be what we'll do. I don't think we need a motion that we'll table the bylaws part of our discussions. Is there any other business, any other subject someone wishes to raise? I'll accept a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
A
So
second.
moved, so moved. I gotta remember this.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Meeting is adjourned.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In regards to the report there.
Thank you, everyone.
Can you just show me on the 2153 Robin Wood